listen to me. The Lord is our God. The Lord is the one and only God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. Love him with all your strength. The commandments I give to you today must be in your hearts. Make sure your children learn about them. Talk about them when you are at home. Talk about them when you walk along the road. Speak about them when you go to bed, and speak about them when you get up. Write them down and tie them on your hands as a reminder. Also tie them to your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your house. Also write them on your gates.
Whew, I was worried. I didn't know where my first page of my sermon went. I had to run over and print another copy out. I was like, man. Thank you, Savannah, for reading for us. I really appreciate students being willing and involved. I appreciate Ben being a leader who wants students involved in service. It's a real cool thing. So thank you. I appreciate it. Before we get started, I want to pray and just bathe this time in prayer. So will you pray with me? Well, God, I thank you so much. I thank you for being God. I thank you for the opportunity that we have this morning to gather together as a body of believers with a common goal in mind. Lord, I thank you for this church and the blessing it is to be a part of it. So, Lord, I pray that over the next little bit, that we would focus our hearts on you, that we would turn our minds towards you, that every word that comes out of my mouth would be yours and not my own. We give this all to you, all the glory, all the honor, and all the praise for what you will do in this service. And it's in your name I pray. Amen. As I was working on this message, I spoke with the staff. I speak with them all the time. But I spoke with the staff. I spoke with some other friends in ministry on how I could best encourage you all while at the same time speaking a difficult message. And so we went back and forth and discussed, and the staff gave me a lot of pointers and ideas. So this morning I want to preface my message by saying this. My aim in the message this morning is not to pile on. It's not to make you feel guilty that you're doing a terrible job as a parent or a grandparent or whatever role you are in. It's not my intention also to be trite or oversimplify what is one of the most challenging tasks that we're ever going to have in our lives. And that's to be a parent. That's to raise someone that may not be our own. But those are challenging tasks. But this message at hand is something that's important. And on the wall over there, Ben and a crew created that the time is now. It's a cool piece. But that's what our sermon this morning is focused around, this idea that the time is now. And I say that because there's an immediacy, there's an urgency amongst our student ministry, amongst our children's ministry, amongst students and children in general, that something has to change. And so this morning, we're going to dig in. We're going to look at why the time is now. We're going to look at everything pertaining to that and revolving around that. But it all focuses back on that Deuteronomy passage. It is time for us as a generation of people, as parents, as adults, as leaders, it's time for us to rise up. For far too long, generations have been walking away from God. And we have tried our hardest. We've come up with new theories and new tactics and new ways to do it. But something has to change. We have to, as a church, as a generation of people, we have to rise to the occasion. You see, over the past 11 or 12 years in the time that I've been in ministry, I've experienced every range of emotion that you could imagine with families that I've ministered to and students. I've celebrated momentous occasions, some of the greatest times. I have walked through some of the toughest life situations with students and family, and I don't like those at all, but I've walked through those with them. I've laughed with students and families. I've cried with students and families. I've seen students graduate. I've seen students start adult life, in quotations. We all learn. I've seen them start this, just becoming a young adult. But one of the toughest things that I've seen happen is to watch a student walk away from their faith, just to give it all up and say, you know what, this isn't for me. And that is by far one of the hardest things I've ever seen. And I hate to say that I've seen it more than once. And it's so tough to see that. But that is why this morning there's the urgency. That is why this morning the time is now for us to rise up, for us to step up, for us to do something. It's not a slap in the face intentionally, but maybe it's a wake-up call for us to do something. It is time for us as a church, for us as followers of Christ, for us as parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or influential people in the life of a child or a student to do something. It's time for us to step up. And so this morning, we're going to dig into Deuteronomy 6, the passage that Savannah read. So if you want to open up to Deuteronomy 6, that's where we're going to be at this morning. We're going to be in chapter 6, starting off in verse 4. I want to reread the passage to you and just go through and highlight a couple different things that come to my mind as we're going through it. So we're going to start in verse 4, and here's what it says. It says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all of your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Now listen, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates." You see, when I look at this passage, yeah, it was written several thousand years ago, but its truth is still applicable today. Go back through that passage and you see from where it starts out in verse 7, impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home. There's nothing uncommon about that. You as parents, you sit with your children, you sit with your students around tables, around your house, wherever it is. You have opportunities to sit with them and talk. If you're a parent of a young child, you probably put your child in bed. And so you have an opportunity to read a Bible verse with them, to pray with them. There's all these things are applicable today still. In Deuteronomy 6, as we look through that, this is where we'll discover why God must be central in our lives. Plain and simple, why he must be central in all of this. Why we're to live out what God says, and why we're to love God more than anything else. Because that's where it starts. That's where everything starts, the core of all of this. If we don't love God personally, how are we ever going to share that love with our children, with those that we are tasked with taking care of? There's no way we're going to get that. So we have to start out at the core, at the base, and understand what it means to love God ourselves. We've got to start with the heart first, and we've got to look at the issue that's in front of us before we can even move before anywhere else. In short, we've got to be passionate about him and about parenting. Those are both key concepts. In a book called Think Orange by Reggie Joiner, he is the kind of the founder of this orange movement, this orange philosophy that Shively Christian has adopted, this vision that sets all of up what we're going to be talking about this morning. But he offers his take on what Moses is telling the people. And he says this: if you're going to impress these truths on the hearts of your children, you will be more deliberate about creating a rhythm within your home. In the future, there will be a host of things that will distract you, and it will be easy to drift away from the importance of having an everyday kind of faith. What was instinctive in Hebrew homes would now need to become intentional in future families. He adds, the principle of rhythm is transferable to every culture throughout all time. Generally speaking, all people groups get up with the sun, move around during the day, share meals, and sleep throughout the night. It's important for parents to cooperate with the way life naturally happens. And when you look at when you look at your life as a family, there are rhythms that come in your family. And when I look at my family now, there is a rhythm that has changed in the last 7 months. Immensely. I tell you, it's been a blessing, but our lives have changed, and it's for the better. But when we look at our lives, our rhythms, a lot of times focus around what Trenton is doing. It just happens to be because he's 7 months old, and that's just the way it is. But our rhythm focuses around taking care of him and integrating everything we do to serve him, to help him, because he can't do it on his own yet. But everything we do has that in mind, and he is a part of every single rhythm, from the time he gets up till the time we take him to Mother's Day out, and we pick him up, and we feed him, and all of these things. There's rhythms that happen in there. But for you in your life, the busyness of those rhythms sometimes gets washed out. We forget the importance of creating God-honoring rhythms in our life. And the truth in Deuteronomy 6, it also rings true in Proverbs 22:6. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it." You see, part of creating this rhythm, part of understanding how we flow, how we move, part of that is training and impressing, back on Deuteronomy, training and impressing on your child the importance of faith in every aspect of their life. Because let's be honest, if we as parents, as we as leaders in our homes, if we're not doing it, how do we expect our kids to do it? You've heard it before when you've told your kid to do something and you say, "But why? You're not doing it." "Because I said so. Go." And that's how it ends up. It's like, because I said so is the answer. But is that the mindset that we need to have? Yes, as a parent, you have an authority. Because you say something, your child should respect it. But what are we teaching our children about things? Well, if mom and dad are doing this, or grandma and grandpa are doing this, why can't I? Just because they say so is not going to be a good enough answer when they get to be in the group that I'm in charge of now and tasked to lead. Because if I say, "because I say so," they're going to shrug their shoulders and say, "Whatever, I'm not listening to you." That's just how it works. You hate to say that, but that's the truth of it. So in your families, in your homes, if we are to take this task on, if we are to look at the task in front of us, we have to train up our children and teach them what it means to be consistent, to be honest, to be God-honoring people. Because they will catch on to those threads where we aren't God-honoring, where we aren't good people, way quicker than they catch on to the God-honoring threads. And I don't know about you, but it scares me that there's going to be something that I say sometime where Trenton's going to pick it up, and I'm going to regret that I said that to him. It's coming, I'm sure, but I want to prevent myself from doing that. So here's the thing. When you guys look at your lives, when you look at your families, the first thing that has to change is we have to have a family-centered mindset. Whether it's in ministry here at church, whether it's in your own homes, you have to put family first. You have to think family in every aspect. And a couple years ago, we introduced this orange philosophy, this orange way of thinking, because as a church, we said the time is now for us to stop doing things on our own, to partner with parents, to bring all of these things together. If you weren't here for that, let me just give a quick summary of that. Orange equals change. And one of my favorite seasons is fall. I love the changing of the leaves. I just love that time of the year. You can still wear shorts, but it's cool. It's not too hot usually. It's just a great season. But everything is changing. All of this stuff. And relate that back to church. The church needs to change too. They need to change their way of thinking, because honestly, there are about 70 to 80% of students that when they reach adult age, they walk away. They say, you know what, I threw my towel in, I did my time, my parents forced me to come to church, it's not for me anymore. But he says 70 to 80% of of children who grow up in a church walk away. And the red, this idea, the red represents family, this concept of orange. Red represents the family and the love of the family. And yellow is the light of the world, Jesus, and how we as a church reflect that. And so when those two combine, when they get meshed together, we get orange. And that's the way it should be, because it shouldn't be, well, family's over here and church is over there. It needs to be in the middle. We need to connect together. We need to be on the same page. So that's what this process about, that's what orange is all about. In essence, the family and church must partner together, and that's what it's all about. And if we're not on that same page, we're always going to be off a step. And we don't want that anymore. We as a church recognize that we need to come alongside of you, that we need to partner with you, that we need to support you in whatever way possible. So here's the thing. Joyner also stated in that we must use strategies that have an end in mind. And so when we look at church and everything that we do, as we evaluate what it is we're doing in each ministry, we always have an end in mind. We always have goals, and the primary goal of every single thing we do is, does it point people towards Christ? Does it lead people towards Christ? Does it disciple them? Does it teach them to go out and equip people and serve people and disciple other people? If it does not do those things, if it's not a part of all these ideas of go and being a part of that, then we need to evaluate it and look and see, is this something we need to do? So everything we do has to have an end in mind. But there are challenges when you're thinking family. There are a ton of challenges, and I recognize in the 11 or 12 years that I've been in ministry, the challenges have gotten greater, and the stuff that I've had to walk through with families, I can't even mention, but there is so much pain, there's so much hurt, there are so many situations that it just blows my mind away, and it hurts and it kills me, because some of these could have been prevented, others there's just no way it could have been. But there are challenges, and the family structure has changed so much across the board that we've identified some of these things that complicate churches and families from partnering together. Parents and children lead now, more than ever, the most dictated lives. Their lives are full of stuff. Their calendars are so full. Every single day is dictated by what you have to do, whether it's cheer practice, band practice, chess practice, reading practice, I don't know, you name it. There's so many practices, there's so many things that we're being pulled into. Secondly is parents are just resource poor. And unfortunately, we as parents live at about 113% of our income. So we don't even have the resources, the funding to take care of our family, to take care of our children, because of things that are even out of our control. And families are more complex demographically, sometimes made up of step-parents, grandparents, stepchildren, step-grandchildren, other arrangements with aunts or uncles, all of these different things, which are different from the traditional families that we saw several years ago. And it creates an interesting mixture of how we respond as a church. There's another one that says families have so many outside pressures that they're dealing with now that we've never had to deal with before. And then there's also the regular pressures of grades, of school, of jobs, of just balancing all of that stuff. And this morning, our students, we've been going through a series called Chaos, and how we respond in chaos. And it's part of that rhythm of understanding for students how they respond to that chaos. But if there is so much chaos in the life of your family, your kids are going to notice that. And so we need to figure out how we kind of put the brakes on things and say, okay, what is important here? What do I need to stop? How can I slow down for a minute and refocus? And here's the last one. Families have to deal with an overwhelming amount of information and choices. There are so many options of things that you can do today that it just blows my mind away. There were not that many options when I was a kid, even more for some of you as we go back further in time. But we've got to look at all of that. And here's the thing, guys. It is said that this generation is one of the most difficult to raise a child in. And I believe that because there are so many things pulling our children, our students away from God, that what choice do they have? Every turn they make, every corner they make, they're being told to do something different. We have cell phones, smartphones. They had cell phones 10 years ago, but there weren't smartphones like there were now. And so every corner we turn, they're being pulled. There's so many external forces that pull us in so many different directions. Even in the midst of all of those external factors, sometimes the most important thing that can happen in the life of your kid, and listen to this, sometimes the most important thing that can happen in the life of your kid is what happens in your life. Sometimes the most important thing that can happen in the life of your child is what's going on in your life. Because what's going on in your life is going to reflect how they respond to the chaos, how they respond to situations. And if we don't realize that, if we don't make ourselves aware of that, it's going to be chaotic. The power of thinking family first, and I love this, the power of thinking family first has the capability of realigning our mindsets, of recalibrating our focus, and renewing our purpose. If we put family first, if we think that family is important enough, then these things need to happen. We need to recalibrate our focus. We need to realign our mindsets to say, okay, my family is important, so I'm going to put them out front. We also recognize as a church there are voices that parents need to hear. And I realize parenting is hard. I'm like I said, we're new parents. Amy and I are. We've only been at it 7 months. I doubt there is any mom or dad on this planet who will disagree that parenting it's tough. Parenting is hard because it includes some of the sleepless nights, which thank goodness we are out of that for now at least. For now, I know it's coming again. I just am not looking forward to it. I enjoy going to bed at a normal time and waking up not at a normal time, but I'd rather go to bed at a normal time. But it's those sleepless nights, and it's sibling arguments. You know how they were growing up. It was all these stupid things. Like, I had 2 sisters, so it was usually me, like, shooting the Barbie doll's head off or something, and me getting in trouble. Other people, I always wanted to sit in the front seat too, so that was always the argument because I would run to the front seat, and then my older sisters would want me to move, and I was the baby, so I usually got in the way. I don't know how good that was, but it worked for me. Or there's school projects where parents of teenagers, maybe more than anything, you guys know this, where your child comes up to you and says, hey, I had a project that's due tomorrow. It's like 10 o'clock at night, so you have to go to the store now and buy poster board and crayons and 50 other things for this project that's a poster project. That's 50% of their grade, and if you don't do it, they're going to flunk class and they're going to bad. I had to do that for a student for a kid we were watching. He came up to us. We were driving him home, and he said, Geoff, I have a project due tomorrow. And his parents weren't going to be in town. And so I was like, okay. And it was this 50% of his grade project. So we stayed up all night, and he got an A+ on the project. That's all I can say. It was good. But here's the thing. We recognize the chaos in your life. As a church, we recognize that. And simply keeping your child fed, keeping them clean, and fairly happy is no small feat. But for those of us, and I think that's most parents, but for those of us who truly want to parent well and with a great purpose, we intentionally want to seek help, want to seek resources. And that's what we as a church want to do. We want to help resource you, support you, come alongside of you. And we recognize that there are going to be bumps, there are going to be hiccups, there are going to be challenges along the way. And that's what we're here for. That is what we as a church are here for, is to help you and support you and encourage you in your raising of your children. Kerry Newhoff, who's part of this orange movement, he says this: as hard as parenting is, I'm convinced that our job as leaders in the church is to offer parents support. Even the best intentioned, best resource families are anxious for ideas and encouragement. It doesn't matter who you are as a parent, as an adult. There are times when we're going to need help. And I'm not afraid to ask for help when I don't know how to do something, because I'd rather get it done right than it not be done properly. And so if I need to ask for help, if I don't know how to do something, we've got like 50 friends on speed dial. Hey, how do you do this? And it's what we need in our lives. And as a church, we want to be able to be that resource for you. And I speak with parents constantly, and the overarching cry is a cry for help, for resources, and for support. There are so many voices speaking to your students, whether they're in elementary, even in preschool, or whether they're students in middle school or high school. There are so many voices that are speaking to your students. And they're telling you how to parent. They're judging you on how you parent. And I'm sure it's difficult to discern where to focus attention. Parents, your number one influence, and I want you to hear this, your number one influence, you are the number one influence in your child's life. You are the number one influence, not the church, not the staff, not the elders, not the deacons. You are the number one influence in your child's life. Nobody else even comes close. You're the number one influence. It's said that in a year, parents have about 3,000 hours that they have opportunities to pour in, to invest in the lives of their children. On average, a church worker, a leader, has between 40 and 80. That's not a whole lot. So when you look at the weight of that situation, you are the greatest influence for a reason. You're with them so much. You have so much to share with them. But as you journey through parenting, you begin to realize that there really are other voices that your kids need to hear. And there are a small pool of people that you as a parent trust in these difficult places on your parenting journey. These partners are usually looked for, and we hope that we are one of those partners for guidance, support, encouragement, and accountability. And these are typically the voices that you as a parent lean into when times are tough. As a church, we want to help you partner, or we want to help partner with you. But let me clarify something first, so that we understand. You are the primary spiritual leader in your kid's life. I'm not. And I love your students. I love helping them through situations. But you are the parent. And as much as I want to help take the lead on a situation, I will give you as much support and as much encouragement. But the discipline, the leadership, it has to come from you. Because if they don't see it from you, it's not going to apply into their life. And I know that may be tough for you to hear, and you may say, well, Geoff, why is the church even around then? The church is around to support you, to encourage you, to help you become a better parent. Parents, it's your responsibility to train up your child. And that is the greatest task as a parent, to raise them and to train them and impress on them all of these things. It's the church's responsibility to come alongside you and encourage you, resource you, and support you. We recognize that this always isn't going to be clear-cut, that there are families that have just disintegrated so much that the church needs to step in and help out. And we're willing to do that. But across the board, we want to encourage families to connect on levels that they haven't before. And students, use your families, use your parents. They need you as much as you need them. And they want to be in relationship with you. So please understand that. But you are the main spiritual influencer in the life of your child. From birth to 12th grade, we have teams in place for that specific reason. We have teams that are for elementary and preschool and tyke zone age, all the way up to high school. That we have people that love your students, that take care of them, that support them, that want to encourage them. Our teams truly do love your students. And I say that to my students every single time I see them, that I love them, because I truly do. I love them and care about them so much that I want them to see Christ, and I want to point them towards Christ at every turn. But if they're not hearing that at home, if they're not hearing the significance and the importance of following Christ, then what I'm saying is just kind of washed out. Our intention is that these voices speak truth and are a source of encouragement, that they are pointing you to the one true voice, and that's God. It is from Him that you, parents, will find guidance and renewal, even in the middle of chaos. And in the midst of a very loud and distracting culture, we have the privilege to crank up the volume and give you some encouragement, to support you and point you towards Christ. So here's the thing. As you look at thinking family first, as you look at finding voices that need to be a part of your life in this journey, and when we look at this idea that the time is now, there are next steps that we need to start taking. And as we look at how we as a church partner, as we as a church support and resource you, our staff and some of the leaders, we came up with ideas of how we can partner with you and how you can do some stuff on your own currently. The first thing is parents. In each area of our ministries, we have what's called a parent queue. And Chris has done a great job of making sure those are out, but here's the reality: a lot of you just aren't taking them. And I know that may sound rough and difficult, but he spends time working on those resources, and he spends time teaching these children these key things, and the parents just aren't utilizing that resource. And this is one of the greatest resources because it ties what's being taught here in with your home. And so if you go downstairs or over to Kids Zone when you leave, you will have an opportunity to take a parent cue. And it's something you can interact with your kids with, dialogue with them, and it's got questions and all these different things. That's the first and easiest step that you can take in making a difference. Secondly, be a part of a family mission trip. And I say this, I introduced this to our students this morning. We recognize that if we as a church are going to make progress and we're going to stand in front of the stage and talk about combining all of these influences, that we better put action to it. And so this year, we're going to do a family mission trip. We're not going to do a student mission trip. So we're going to allow for students and families to go together because we recognize that these influences need to be combined. We recognize that this will be a great opportunity to serve alongside of your student in a cross-cultural context. We believe in this process so much that we said, hey, this year we're not doing one on our own. And that's how much we believe in families and ministry in this church, is that we're willing to say, you know what? It's more important to connect these resources, to connect these two sides and bring them together. Thirdly, serve with your child or your student. Serve along. We had people here yesterday, families that were serving in different parts of our building, student, adult, child, adult. They were serving, cleaning up, taking care of stuff. And it was cool to see because there was no complaining, there was no griping. They just jumped in and did what they need to do. And that's cool stuff. But find a place where you can serve with your student, with your child, and do it. Here's another thing. Make time to ask tough questions. Share Bible verses, pray together, encourage one another. It all goes back to this Deuteronomy 6, the things that it's laid out in there, the fact that you have chances to sit down with your child. You're in a car with your kid, whether it's on the way to school, on your way to practice, all of those things. Those are times, those are opportunities for you to speak truth into their lives. We got to start taking advantage of these things. And lastly, be an example. Find a place to serve in the church so that your kids, see you serving, see you actively involved in this church. Because when they see that, when they see that you are taking a part, when you're actively involved, when you're actively serving, they see that and they take action of that. As we close out this morning, as we look at all of these things, next steps are great, but next steps happen when we actually take a step. Next steps, actually, you see progress when you start moving, when you start walking, and when you start making changes. None of that happens unless we choose to get up, to walk out and start doing stuff. None of that's going to happen if we don't choose today to do something. And you as parents, you have a great opportunity this morning to, in front of your kids, in front of your students, to make that decision, to make a next step and say, you know what, the time is now. It's time for me as a parent to say, no more will I put my kids behind, my family will be at front, and we're going to point towards Christ in everything we do. There's a lot of restoration that needs to happen in our families. I know we're not perfect, and that's the beauty of God and how he restores us. God is in the business of restoration. He restores our hearts constantly. And that's what needs to happen probably in a lot of our lives, is that we need restoration so that we can start this process, so that we can start thinking family first. So maybe that needs to happen this morning. Maybe you need to make the first step and say, you know what, I need my life restored. So in a few minutes, there'll be elders. Some of us staff will be up here to pray with you if you need to make a next step. If you need to make this church your home, and you say, you know what, I love this church. I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of what they're doing. Now's the time. What better time than to rally up and say, you know what, this is the time for me and my family to serve the Lord here at Shively. It's a beautiful thing. Whatever decisions need to happen, I just encourage you to make them. Don't wait any longer, because your kids see them. We don't see it as a judgment. I don't think that. But we see those things. And in the lives of students and kids especially, they see those things and it makes an impression on them. Let me pray. God, I love you more than anything else in this world. I love you. And God, I love serving at Shively Christian Church, and I love the people of this church. And I want nothing more for them to follow you, to put you first in their lives. And I know that that means some tough decisions have to be made at times. And so, Lord, I pray that we would put you first, that we would put you in front, that we would surrender all of our lives to you. You're worth it. You're worth every bit of it, every bit of that surrender. And so, Lord, I pray that this morning, that we would surrender all to you. We love you so much, and I thank you for who you are. It's in your name I pray. Amen.